You're walking down a dimly lit street at night and you sense a figure behind you. You pick up the pace, but you still feel the energy of this figure closing in. It's like nothing you felt before, and now you can't feel at all. The body is frozen, but you can sense a pressure plunging into your neck. First fear, then euphoria takes over. The figure behind you begins to drain your life force, but you don't mind. The figure, who feels male, remains behind you and out of sight, then drops you to the ground and things start to go cold. He steps under the flickering light of a street lamp, and then you see it. Bloody fangs that retract back into the mouth, and eyes that shine more brightly than any human. You've just been sucked clean by a vampire. And as you're lying there waiting for death to claim you, you think, damn, if only I'd known more about this dark creature, I could have saved myself. Or maybe I could have convinced him to make me one. Sadly, it's too late. But for everyone else who's listening or watching, welcome to the Zach Show for a special Halloween vampire extravaganza, where you'll learn about vampire history, legends, strengths, and weaknesses. What you do with this information is solely up to you. You may use it for vampire self-defense, vampire hunting, or you can use it to try to become a vampire yourself. We make no judgments on this show, so sit back, relax, and enjoy as Dr. Julie Labau and I walk you through this blood-sucking Halloween special. Let's get into it. On that note, welcome back to the Zach Show, everyone. We're doing a special Halloween edition on vampires. And I'm here with my beautiful, lovely wife.
Yeah, first episode since we got married.
Dr. Julie Labau. And I just want to note that I'm wearing my ring and
we got the
you do have your ring. I was gonna say you're not wearing your ring, but
No,
now we have the power of the ring. We've been married for a little bit over a month, so we have all of his grand wisdom on, what it takes to make a marriage work. If you're looking to make things last for at least 5 weeks, come to us, send me a DM, and I'll let you know all of the secrets of a lasting union. But today we're not going to be talking about human unions necessarily, but we are going to be talking about the vampire union with human pop culture that has completely taken over. There's vampire shows, vampire movies, vampire books. In the last couple decades or so, vampire pop culture, vampire content has, it seems like it's exploded 1,000-fold from what it was before. And we're going to take a little journey through the centuries of vampire tales, vampire mythology. And I just want to say that my wife and co-host Julie has a PhD in neurology or neuroscience.
Yeah,
One of those. Which one is it?
It's the same thing.
I thought neurology was nerves.
No, neurology is also, it's just what you'd say more for like a medical doctor.
Okay, so she has a degree, is what she's saying. PhD in neuroscience. That may not help at all today, but just know that when we're talking about vampires, that she has a PhD, so if we say something outlandish that isn't factually or scientifically correct, you can take it out on her. Yeah, you can take it out on her. Exactly. So I want to start today, before we dive into a little bit of the history of the vampire phenomenon. What comes to your mind when you think about vampires? When you think about the creature of the night, the bloodsucker, what's the thing that comes to you when you ponder the vampire?
I guess mostly men tends to be sexy with talc-like skin, fangs. Maybe he's got a cape and he's very, very old, but somehow always looks 30 years old. Obviously, Dracula, the OG, comes to mind. Growing up in the 90s, I think one of the first pop culture references I had was like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and then like Charmed. I think there's some vampires coming. I mean, it's mostly like demons and witches, but like I think this was my upbringing to the dark side of the myths and stuff. But yeah, and I guess more recently Twilight, which I've never seen, but obviously it's such a big cultural moment that it's impossible not to know what it is.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would say that's mostly it. And then whatever from the latest shows that we've been watching.
That's true. We are currently watching Interview with the Vampire, the AMC series. But going back to what you said, the first memory that you have with vampires, I guess you were saying it's with
Buffy
the Vampire Slayer. So I never watched that, but I watched a movie called The Little Vampire with the kid from Stuart Little. Do you remember that?
Vaguely, yeah. Oh, isn't there like a vampire on Sesame Street as well?
Yeah, there is.
Yeah, I think that also brings it back.
I never really identified with Sesame Street. I'm sure that I was sat in front of the TV and watched hundreds of hours of Sesame Street, but I never really I never really feel like I connected with it. But The Little Vampire is probably my first pop cultural memory of vampires. And then I have a memory of when I was a kid. This is probably 7 or 8 years old. And I was, I was a chubster. I was a little blueberry ball back in the day. And I remember that a big fear of mine, or maybe not a fear, but just like sort of an anxiety, was wearing
Get slaughtered like a pig?
Yeah, no. I mean,
like I'm fat and juicy.
If I wore a pig costume, someone might have mistaken me for the shape and roundness of a pig.
Yeah, you were like round like a blueberry, so I assumed
I was just chubby.
Nice
I was chubby. I was the fatter one in my grade. And so an anxiety of mine when we would go.
Who's laughing now?
When we would go trick or treat. That's right. I'm hot as fuck now. I'm gonna be recording a podcast in the future. Not only on how to keep your wife for at least 5 weeks, but how to become a Chris Hemsworth stunt double lookalike. So keep an eye out for that episode. I'm also going to be, just teaching about the hair and the face and the style. As you can see right now, I have a 7-day-old t-shirt with some dandruff. But if you rock it like you're hot as fuck, like myself, then it doesn't matter. But back to the rotundness.
I'm rocking merch, by the way.
Yes, you are. You're rocking Auxoro merch, and I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
So I had an anxiety of going trick-or-treating with my friends, but all the Halloween costumes are so tight, like superheroes, whatever it is. Like there's a lot of spandex when it comes to kids' Halloween costume. Everything is essentially a onesie, like a Power Ranger. Yeah, but there's more options as an adult. Everything.
Yeah, you can pay more money for it.
Yeah, exactly. But everything when you're a kid, it's like a spandex onesie of different varieties of characters. And so I didn't want to wear something tight because it made me feel fat. And so I remember thinking, oh, I'm gonna be a vampire because the cape is going to go around me. So
around the spandex.
Around the spandex. So I'll have sort of a cover, because I remember I would always look down at my nipples and be like, why do my nipples...
Looking down, I have no penis.
Yeah, why do my nipples... First of all, 1, where is my penis? And 2, why do my nipples extend so much further than my friend's nipples?
Mom, why do I have boobs?
And then and then third, I was like, I'm just going to wear a cape, because then I can do like the thing where you bring the cape over your face and you pretend to be a vampire and you go with the fangs, and then you're basically covering your whole body. So
well, you just need to hold a cape like this all night then.
Exactly. When I was probably walking around with my bag of treats in one hand and then the cape holding the other hand, or the hand holding the cape. But I remember I was like, oh, I'm gonna wear a cape because that's going to allow me to wear something tight and black underneath, which is the thing that I probably came with, and then I'll have the cape as a cover, and then I won't feel as much of a fat piece of shit. And it worked out, and I remember having a really good time that Halloween, and everything was good. But yeah, that was my early memories with vampires. And let's dive into the history of the vampire.
Not you spilling out your trauma from a kid.
Oh, I don't consider it trauma. I was much fatter when I was a kid, but it was like chubby weight. Like it came off quickly once I was in high school, like 10th, 11th grade. But before, like I wouldn't say I was traumatized by it. I just think about it every day.
Yeah,
It's not
exactly.
trauma. It just affects the way that I think, act, and behave, and I can't let it go, and I often have nightmares about it. But it's I wouldn't characterize it in the
Trauma
aspect of trauma.
category.
No, exactly. But so I want to get into the history of where the vampire came from, and I want to start with a big bang, the thing that kind of kicked off the vampire, and then we're gonna sort of take a step back into history to go into like thousands of years ago for the more general blood-sucking myths. But the thing that kicked off the vampire as we know it today is Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Mm-hmm.
Are you familiar with the original Dracula by Bram Stoker? Any sort of depictions from the book? Have you seen the movie? Have heard anyone talk about it?
I mean, yeah, I'm familiar with that, sort of with the original Dracula. That is a very book. When was it published? Like 1800s or something?
It was published in, let me give that a quick check. I believe it was early 1900s.
Okay.
It was 1897.
Well,
So
we
right
were
on
kind of like
right
right on edge.
right on the cusp.
But I don't really know like I I've heard it before, but I definitely need a little not flashback, but I need you to refresh my memory
Little
on kind of
refresher?
like what led him to be like think of the idea of a vampire, and
All
like
right.
was there already some vampiric ideas but nothing quite as much of a symbol of Dracula, and he kind of took a proper shape as Dracula? Like what happened before? Because I know that like the idea of vampires have been around for pretty much as long as humans have lived. I mean,
Yeah.
witches were there way before, so I would be surprised that vampires didn't come back before. Heck, we have vampires that exist. Like they are vampire bats that do drink blood from like
Mm.
cows and stuff. So like we do have like mosquitoes are technically kind of like vampires. So we do have like animals that drink blood. We have so I'm sure like the idea of a creature of the night that drinks blood must have been around for centuries and centuries. So what happened before the book?
So
know.
we'll get into that. I want
Okay.
to start with the book
All right, let's
first.
start with the book.
We'll because this is really what kicked off the modern depiction of the vampire, and then we'll sort of take a step back
Okay.
and get into the history of it. But Bram Stoker's Dracula. So the modern day depiction of the vampire has its. Oh, I like when you suck on the straw, sort of like a sucking sound
I'm
effect
not
of the
sucking
vampire.
on the straw. I'm sucking
Yeah.
out the rest of
Yeah,
my drink.
suck that bloody pumpkin spice. The modern day depiction of the vampire has its origins in Bram Stoker's Dracula. Stoker loosely based Dracula on Vlad the Impaler, the 3-time ruler of Wallachia, which is a province that's now in modern day Romania. Vlad was held hostage by the Ottoman Empire so that his father, nobleman Vlad Dracul, would pledge allegiance to the Ottomans. Vlad then escaped his being held hostage, who he was also held hostage alongside his brother. So Vlad escaped that, and he grew on to rule Wallachia 3 times, earning the nickname Vlad Tepes, Vlad the Impaler, when translated. And this is because he literally impaled thousands of people during his reign. It was his favorite thing to do, apparently.
Like at war, or just being like, bring me 30 men that I shall impale.
So the example that I'm going to get into is war, but like anything, if you do it during war, sometimes you bring it back with you into normal life. Like guys who would go over to Vietnam and they would try different drugs, opium, heroin, and then they come back to the US and then they're like, all right, I'm going to, keep this going or not. It depends on you. So he could have been in war, impaled, a few guys, and was like, you know what I really want to do, what helps me digest after a nice meal, is just impaling a local plebe or a servant. And, you know,
Right.
that really helps calm me down. It helps his
Helps me sleep.
PTSD.
Yeah, right.
His PTSD from war is just like slowly putting a stake through someone's skull to help him wind down at the end of the night. That's just speculation. But an actual example of Vlad the Impaler impaling people is during one of his epic battles against the Ottomans. Vlad impaled 23,844 captives in a semicircle stretching 1 mile long. Can you visualize that?
Can you say that again?
Vlad, during a battle against the Ottomans, impaled 23,844 captives in a semicircle pattern that stretched for over 1 mile long. So
He must have had a really long stick.
you think he was compensating for something?
For miles, Jesus.
Yeah. He go for every life I take through impaling, that adds 1 centimeter
But
to
how
my
long did that take him?
stick.
That's so many people.
Well,
Did they do that in one setting?
it sounds like it was one battle. It sounds like they won.
But that's a story.
They won
that
the
did
battle.
Not actually happen.
No, that's an actual recorded thing that I looked up. Vlad the Impaler. Let me just double check. Battle semicircle. Yeah, the Ottomans invaded Wallachia. They found 23,844 impaled Turks that Vlad the Impaler had left for them. So I don't know if it was all at once or they won a bunch of battles and this was like the addition, like every time they won another battle, they would just add to the impaling.
Or was it like, like a trophy impalement? So it was like basically like we've killed all these people and now we're going to show what we've done. And so you just put them on a pike,
Yeah, that's what I think it was. I think it was like
they were already probably dead and then they're like just put him on a bunch of pikes, like decoration.
I mean, I have no idea, but it seems like it might have been a trophy thing. Like we're going to keep track of how many people we
or
take
just
out.
Like warning. It's just like, look at all the people that we've killed.
But and then also, if we do it in a semicircle, because it's kind of like a wall, like if you do it, so like you're going to encounter it no matter where you come in from. You're going to have
scarecrow. Like a bunch of scarecrows be like, oh my God, there's so many people standing, and it's just like dead people impaled.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's another
an army ahead.
Yeah, the another army is marching towards them, and the one of the soldiers looks at the other one, like, and he goes, "Damn, this army really smells like shit that we're approaching."
Also,
and they're not moving. I've never smelled an army this bad before.
Sir, we've been waiting here for 3 days. They have not moved.
Yeah, and they're wearing these weird spike hats. It looks like
they're not sleeping. They're not eating. They're literally just there. What's up?
No idea. Yeah, they're baking in the sun. They don't move.
Ew.
I've never seen someone this disciplined to just their faces are melting, but they're not moving. It's crazy.
Yeah.
So there were 23,000 or over 23,000 captives that were impaled in a semicircle, in Vlad's Wallachia, his ruling. And so they could have added one by one. They could have done it. I doubt it was after one battle. It was probably like you were saying. They just kept adding it as a trophy, but also as a warning that if you try to come fuck with us, we're gonna fuck you with a stick through your head.
Yeah, or maybe they were really into Halloween and would be like, you know what would make great decorations?
Yeah, that's right.
A yard? A huge yard.
Sort of like these lights behind us. We have, for those of you who are just listening, we have fall leaves behind us that light up. Just think of these like the bodies that Vlad the Impaler would impale on sticks. And this is also like a semicircle pattern behind us. So this could be, something similar, like you're saying, a decoration of sorts, a fatal decoration.
Thinking, like the Halloween houses that have like all these skeletons and stuff. There's just like scary yards, something like this.
That too, it could be. So Vlad's father bestowed upon him the name Dracula, which in Romanian means devil or dragon. So he called him Dracula's son or Dracula. So son of the dragon, son of the devil. And
Vlad was called Dracula.
Vlad,
Okay.
his father bestowed upon him the name Dracula.
Okay.
According to legend, Vlad does not seem to have habitually drank blood. There is an account, though, of him burning a whole Transylvanian suburb in a winter raid and having the captives impaled. He really liked impaling. Everywhere he went, he was on
We've come, we must put them on a pike.
Yeah, vacation, impale, work, impale, happy hour, impale. He was fucking impaling and fucking impeccably. And perpetually. So there is an account of him burning a whole Transylvanian suburb in a winter raid, having the captives impaled, and then watching as his men cut off victims' limbs while he sat at the table and dined. Here we are told that he, quote, dipped his bread in the blood of the victims, since watching human blood flow gave Vlad courage. This apparently factual blood drinking would feed into best-selling pamphlets of the time that spread the legend following his death.
Jesus.
So yeah, he was dipping bread in blood, like dipping, croissants in coffee or whatever your people do. And then he would be like, oh, you guys see this? Write that down, because I want to scare people who can't watch this and put it in a pamphlet and then spread it throughout the empire.
Here's the thing. That also sounds like he's using a lot of like scare techniques and stuff. So I don't know how much believable this is. This sounds a little bit like when France was going bankrupt because of all the spendings that the court was making, they made pamphlets being like, Marie Antoinette was told that France is impoverished, and so she just claimed, well, let them eat cake, which she never actually said. It was like propaganda to be like, which participated in the French being like, screw the court, let's get their heads. So I don't know, like and sometimes it can come from the way up. So I don't know if he was truly dipping bread into their blood, or if he was more like to be like, look at me, I have no respect for corpses. I am better. I'm strong. You should fear me. I will literally drink blood.
Yeah. I mean, if you impale 23,000 bodies, though, it's not a huge step to think that you would just eat blood once to freak people out, and then they would go write about it in pamphlets.
Maybe. Or maybe you just want to try, but like, I don't know if that would be a regular thing. Like, not every serial killers like that enjoy killing are eating their victims or drinking their blood either.
That's true. I mean,
So he can be a psycho without being a cannibal.
Yeah, it's just like he was eating just a warm tomato soup right after he impaled a bunch of people, and then a servant walks in and goes, "Oh my God, is that the blood from the people on the and Vlad's thinking in his head, he's like, "It's not. It's tomato soup." But also, I could use this.
By the way.
Yeah, which you made, so you should know. But Vlad's like, no, I could use this, and he goes, yeah, I am. It's the blood of the impaled, and he pours it over his face, and he's just like,
I mean,
the servant's like, oh my God, this is so appalling.
Yeah.
I wish there was Twitter so I could tweet about this, but I can't. So I'm gonna write it in a pamphlet and spread it around.
Yeah, it's funny how we had this like very small window of decently accurate facts. Where, because before, like photographs and video and stuff, it's very hard to fact check things. It could be like some guy told a story and now it's a fact, or someone think they saw something and it's a fact, and there's no way for us to truly see whether that was real or not. And a lot of people that are archaeologists and historians are trying to like get the facts right, but a lot of it is very hard to know whether it was true or not. And today, with AI, it's so easy to and Photoshop, it's so easy to manipulate the truth that there was like a really small time of like maybe 50, 100 years where we're like, well, this is real. And even then, some people are saying the moon landing wasn't real.
That's true.
So.
And they don't tell you that as a kid when you're going through school and you're reading everything that happened in the history book as do or die facts. And then you find out later that a decent chunk of history, I won't say most because I have no idea what the percentage is, but there's a decent chunk of history that was just commissioned by rich people where they would go, here's 100,000 shekels, write my autobiography, but I have to approve it. So obviously if you include something in there, or make this statue of me and it's just a fat fuck who's balding, sitting in his chair that's paying for it. And he's like, give me an 8-pack and a fucking, small cock. Cause for some reason the Greek statues, they didn't want to give huge dicks. I feel it's all jack guys with small penises, but you wouldn't, like if you had the money, you could just commission your legacy, and people read that today, a lot of it today, as if it happened unquestionably. So yeah. Would you like to learn more about Vlad?
Sure, go on.
So Vlad was known for his brutal tactics against his enemies, for defending his territory against the Ottoman Empire, which made him a national hero in Romania, but also painted him as a fearsome figure. Stoker, the author of Dracula, drew on these elements to create Count Dracula, a character who embodies both nobility and savagery. Additionally, the association of Vlad with vampirism and folklore added to Stoker's portrayal, blending historical fact with myth. This combination of Vlad's historical brutality and the legends surrounding him helped shape the iconic vampire that we know today. So there you go. Vlad the Impaler is named Dracula. Bram Stoker takes and I should note, it's most people that seem to know a lot about vampire history say that it's very loosely based, Dracula, on the life of Vlad the Impaler. It's more Bram Stoker just used him as inspiration. He wasn't like taking facts from his life, but he blended the the mythology of Vlad the Impaler
and also the folklore around vampires
and the folklore around vampires. And also like the legend of Vlad the Impaler, because what's true, what's not true, and then you blend that all in and you get the vampire.
So when was Vlad the Impaler?
Vlad the Impaler was the Ottoman Empire, so that was like 1400s.
Okay.
Yeah. 1448 was he was born, and he died in 1476. So short life. Like, he did a lot. If he died,
I feel like back in the days, that was kind of like the goal. You're like, well, I've got 20 good years. Better make them count.
He died at 29, so that's about 1,000 impaled deaths a year.
Well, okay, I'm sure he's
people.
not the only one who did the impalments. He had people to do that for him.
But I bet you.
But I bet he watched.
Yeah. No. I bet it's probably like a rich person that, like, I don't know how much you know about hunting, and especially like hog hunting. So
it's a hog.
Pigs, like wild pigs. So there are people who, and I mean, it's not just hogs. You could do this with deer, whatever you're going to be hunting. But there are people who go out into the wilderness and they legitimately hunt wild animals for sport. Yeah. And it's hard. They're trying to shoot a deer or an elk or a hog in the wild. And then there's other people with more money, or just they don't want to challenge. So you literally like have a gun and there's a bunch of hogs in a cage, and then some guy releases them and you're just fucking like shooting them as they run out of the cage. Or, you're on someone's land where there's a bunch of deer running around. It's basically like a fucking deer gangbang, and it's like wherever you shoot, you're gonna hit a deer. It's not like there's no long stalking game involved. It's just like very quick thrill. I bet you Vlad was like the rich hunting guy that's like, yeah, I'll let everyone else do like the hard impaling, but like once you have a guy, bring him to me when he's almost dead, and then I'll just fucking stake him through the head.
I don't know, because once again, like I've not read anything about this, but I feel very strongly in my core that was a bit of a demonstration show, and so I think maybe he just wanted people to be impaled to kind of like show how strong he is, how fearsome he is, etc., etc. Be like, beware, everyone. Like, people must respect me, people must fear me, etc. And so he may not even have done any impaling himself. He might have just been like, once you've killed people, like after the war, like every corpse you have out there, just put them on the spike. I don't know.
You got to do at least a few dozen, I feel like, if you're going to get the nickname
Maybe.
Vlad the Impaler.
Well, unless you ordered everyone to just impale everyone all the time, then you can be like, if you're someone that just ordered like 300 people to get their head chopped off on the guillotine, you might be called a guillotineur, but that you'd never actually pull the string yourself.
I think he did do it himself. He did a lot of it himself, because something that I was reading when I'm researching Vlad the Impaler is that the Ottoman Turk Empire and the Wallachians, you know, the Romanian Empire, it was a very harsh time. So he had a very, like, you know, kind of wild, short life. He was taken hostage with his brother when he was a kid, fought his way out of that, like he ruled Wallachia 3 times. So he was in battle and he fought his way to be. So he wasn't like, you know, the Prince of England or whatever, where he's like he's born into it.
Yeah.
He was born into a noble family.
But is he like on his horse with a spear and just kind of like adding bodies at the other spear?
I don't know. I mean, it would be sick if he was to fucking impale someone from a horse. But
maybe that was his weapon of choice, and that's also, I don't know.
It sounds like he was familiar with savagery. I'll say that.
No doubt. But like, I also don't think that he single-handedly spiked 23,000 people.
No. I think he just got credit for it because it was in sort of like, you know, he did, I'm sure, probably some hundreds himself, but it was sort of a buildup of the team of his army. His army was probably doing as a whole, like when you give people, like you get stars on your helmet for kills. He would give people like extra bread for impales. They'd come back with like an eyeball as proof, and he'd be like, "All right, here's some bread," you know.
Maybe, but I also feel like because there has been reports of royalties, like of royal characters that have also been known to be extremely severe and like just get a lot of people killed, like order a lot of death, and then they're known for being savages as well, for being cruel, etc., for being a beheader, but like they may have never done any of the beheading themselves.
I don't think it was that. I think I think it was probably both. He probably ordered a lot of people to be impaled, and then he did impaling himself.
We should have a word count how many times we use the word impaled in this episode.
77. And it's going to be at least 45 more. But so Bram Stoker, before he wrote Dracula, he studied Eastern European folklore for a long time. So we're gonna take a step back, and European folklore in general, before writing Dracula. And so if we rewind a couple hundred years, Voltaire, who is a French Enlightenment philosopher, writer, you probably learned about him in school. For me in America, is probably like 2 lines in the Renaissance. Like,
he's a
Voltaire.
gay icon.
Is Voltaire a gay icon?
Wait, unless I'm getting confused with someone else. But I'm pretty sure Voltaire and Rimbaud had a little affair.
Okay. Well, Voltaire, gay icon, writer, philosopher, French Enlightenment. He actually wrote a dissertation on vampires in the 1700s, unironically. Like, he was a legitimate thinker, and he put a lot of thought into vampires. So this is what Voltaire said about vampires, an excerpt from his vampire dissertation. So Voltaire writes, "These vampires were corpses who went out of their graves at night to suck the blood of the living, either at their throats or stomachs, after which they returned to their cemeteries. The persons so sucked, wane, grew pale, and..."
Sorry. I need to fact check myself. It was actually Verlaine, not Voltaire.
Verlaine.
So different guy.
Okay. Could have been gay, though.
But I don't think they lived at the same time. So.
I mean, Voltaire, 1700s, I feel like that was just ripe for hidden homosexuality. You were just, I mean, it was so hot, because if you got caught, you could get impaled. And that's number 78 right there. So the Voltaire writes, did you hear the beginning of that, or should I go back?
No, please go back. Sorry.
Okay. Voltaire writes, "These vampires were corpses who went out of their graves at night to suck the blood of the living, either at their throats or stomachs, after which they returned to their cemeteries. The persons so sucked, waned, and grew pale, and fell into consumptions. While the sucking corpses grew fat, maybe he was gay. Sucking corpses grew fat, got rosy, and enjoyed an excellent appetite. It was in Poland, Hungary, Silesia, Moravia, Austria, and Lorraine that the dead made this good cheer. We never heard a word of vampires in London nor even at Paris. I confess that in both these cities there were stock jobbers, brokers, and men of business who sucked the blood of the people in broad daylight, but they were not dead, just corrupted. These true, I love his like, yeah, we didn't have vampires in the blood sucking sense. They were just businessmen who sucked people's souls and took all their money. These were the true vampires. These true suckers lived.
Should have called it the Vampire of Wall Street.
Yeah, pretty much. These true suckers lived not in cemeteries, but in very agreeable palaces. The Greeks are persuaded that these dead are sorcerers. They call them Brokoulikos or Vrukoulikos, according as they pronounce the second letter of the alphabet. The Greek corpses go into houses to suck the blood of little children, to eat the supper of fathers and mothers, drink their wine, and break all their furniture. That seems a little bit excessive to, eat.
When did you write this?
I like how, I mean, he was alive in 1700s during the Enlightenment period in France. But yeah, he says the Greeks' corpses, the Greek vampires would go into houses. They would suck the blood of the children, but then they would just eat the supper of the fathers and mothers and drink their wine. So it's like, I'm going to kill your children, but then like, I'm just going to take some of your meal.
And then we can cheers together.
And then we'll cheers. And then I'll break all your furniture in front of you. It's a very
they can't catch a break.
Complex vampire.
Yeah.
The vampires, the Greek corpses or vampires can only be put to rights by burning them when they are caught. But the precaution must be taken of not putting them into the fire until after their hearts are torn out, which must be burned separately. The celebrated Tournefort, sent into Lavaume by Louis XIV, as well as so many other virtuosi, was witness of all the acts attributed to one of these Brokoulikos and to the ceremony. So Voltaire was writing about vampires, during the Enlightenment period. Okay. And it was enough of a European, mostly Eastern European, but just like overall craze in the 1700s that he felt the need to write a dissertation on vampires.
Yeah, maybe I had done too much opium and you were like, you know what? Vampires.
It's possible. Would you like to hear about some ancient vampire mythology?
Yes, tell me about the origins.
So we go from Bram Stoker's Dracula, which is the leaping point of the modern day vampire depiction. Now let's take a step back into some of the roots of ancient vampire mythology. So these societies, these ancient civilizations they never used the word vampire. The word vampire doesn't come to being until like a few hundred years ago, maybe even less than that. But there are...
Well, if Voltaire was saying vampires, clearly it was at least until 1700.
So a few hundred years ago. But the word vampire was not used with the ancient mythologies, but there were creatures that had vampire-like characteristics. So the myth of the vampire has things that can be drawn from ancient societies. Right. So in Mesopotamian mythology, the Lilitu was one of the earliest vampire-like figures, and it comes from ancient Mesopotamia. The Lilitu was a female spirit and was believed to prey on men and newborns exclusively at night. Ancient Greece, the Empusa and Lamia. In Greek mythology, the Empusa was a demon that seduced young men and drained their blood. Lamia, originally a queen, was transformed into a monster that fed on children. So a lot of female vampire characteristics.
Very
a lot of
sexist history.
a lot of children
What a
eaters.
shocker.
No, but I think it's interesting because the modern day vampire is definitely more male.
True. That's true. But like this idea was like, these women, they're just here to suck out the energy out of us, the pleasure out of us,
It
the
could
life
be.
out of us.
Yeah, it could be, but it also, I don't know. I feel like there is a feminine energy to sucking, like the act of sucking for real, like not even as to be funny. And the modern male vampire has a lot of effeminate characteristics.
what
Let me just
sucks?
finish. Let me finish.
You know what
Like
sucks?
Edward Cullen in Twilight, he's probably the biggest example of a vampire in today's
Sure.
modern cult, in like the last few decades at least. He's very effeminate, sort of like dainty, like sparkly. So even the male vampires do have like an effeminate touch to them.
But you know who the biggest suckers are? Babies. That's the real vampires. Like, you're born, first thing you do is you suck to feed yourself.
Yeah.
So
They
babies-
destroy those titties. they
So the babies should
they
truly
nibble
be
those
the ones.
and they suck your life force.
Kind
Any
of,
life
yeah.
you had before
like,
that is now
literally, if you
sucked
see
out of
any
you.
mothers, it's just like,
Yeah. So maybe the female vampires are coming back to suck the blood of the children that took
They're
away
like,
their
"Screw
lives.
you."
Yeah. I was gonna be something before you.
no, but like the babies, I could kind of see, like how there's this idea of like eternal youth as well. And so
Yeah.
I think there might be a theme like this that comes back at it later on, but like they would, like, vampires would target, like, I feel like Dracula and stuff, it tended to be like these young women or like, maybe more like teenager, young adults, because
Yeah.
they're like so full of life, and that's the people that would be targeted because of that idea to stay youthful forever, which carries on to today and this obsession that we have with youth.
Yeah. And not in all vampire myths, but in a lot of vampire stories, you inherit the spirit and the skills associated with the blood.
Mm-hmm.
So there's one show, I think it may be called Dracula on Netflix, but I watched it a while ago. But according to that version of the show, Dracula, let's say he sucks the blood of a German sailor, he can then speak German. And there's one scene where he's trying to have a conversation with an old woman. I forget what language she's speaking. So he's looking for someone on the ship that speaks her language so that he can have a conversation with a woman, quickly runs off, sucks that guy's blood, comes back and has a conversation with her. But then you also, like, he doesn't like drinking the blood of dumb people because it makes him feel more dumb. So he likes people of higher class. He likes people that are smarter, likes people... Like he's very choosy.
Fair enough. This makes less sense to me, but versus, like, for instance, if you drink the blood of someone who's drunk, you're gonna be drunk yourself, or if it's like cancerous blood, it's like
disease
and stuff. But like that makes sense because your blood will change based on this. But like how many languages you speak is not gonna be something that your blood is gonna be in a different right.
I wouldn't need to be paying $12 a month for a language app if I could just go. I could suck your blood. You speak French, so then I could just I could do that once instead of spending 14 hours a month to barely speak French.
Yeah.
Yep. So
there you go.
That's an app. If anyone's looking for an app idea, just ship blood to people's houses of different language ability and then have them take a shot of it, and then you're fluent. I would pay for that. A lot of money. So just an idea. There is actually a mention of blood sucking in Homer's Odyssey, speaking of ancient Greece. So in Homer's Odyssey, Odysseus must travel to the land of the dead. And before the spirits can speak to Odysseus, they must drink the blood of a goat. And the blood gives the spirits strength to recall their life. So the spirits drink the blood, then the spirits can talk to Odysseus. The blood calls to the dead, they desire it. In Roman folklore, there's the Strix. The Strix was a bird-like creature that sucked the blood of infants, again, child suckers, and it was often depicted as a witch or demon. In Eastern European folklore, the Strigoi and Nosferatu in Romania, the Strigoi were undead beings who could rise from their graves. Similarly, Nosferatu in Slavic folklore was cursed to drink blood. These myths arose from fears of death, disease, and the unknown. These figures heavily influenced the depiction of vampires in literature and film, particularly Bram Stoker's Dracula. And also to note, to those in Central and Eastern Europe during the Middle Ages and all the way into the early modern period, so mid 1700s, vampires weren't just folklore; they were treated as real. People there were multiple vampire panics throughout Europe, but mostly concentrated in Eastern Europe, where people were legitimately afraid of vampires. Like the way there's no way to know what it was like because we weren't there, but I imagine maybe not as much as COVID, but like a version of that where you thought if you would go to certain places that vampires were real and it was a constant thing to worry about.
Right.
So just keep that in mind, and we'll get more into that as we go forward. In Indian folklore, the Vitala, in Hindu mythology, the Vitala is a spirit that inhabits corpses and is known for its ability to control the dead. And then finally in Chinese...
It's zombies. It's not vampires, it's zombies.
Sure, but it's I guess being like coming back and a spirit inhabiting the dead is like sort of the vampire, like someone being able to take over. Related, not all of these are direct vampires.
Sure.
And in Chinese mythology, the Jiangshi, which could loosely be translated to hopping vampire or hopping demon, reanimates corpses and feeds on the life of the living. So another sort of zombie thing.
Right.
Fear.
Or like, wait, it's not Death Eater. How are they called the ones in Harry?
The Dementors.
Yeah, exactly, kind of like Dementor vibes.
Yeah, sort of like that. Exactly, a Dementor. So, and this is to keep in mind, and I kind of just said this, but this is in more detail. So there is a widespread belief across ancient Europe and other ancient civilizations up until a few hundred years ago that the dead still required food. I didn't just say this. I thought this was going to be something else. But there was a widespread belief across ancient Europe and other civilizations up until a few hundred years ago that the dead needed food. People were buried with food so that their spirit could consume it. Some tombs have holes bored through the entrance. In Ireland during medieval times, they would pass food through the hole as offerings. So everything for hundreds to thousands of years linked back to pacifying the hunger of the dead. And this is across many different parts of the planet where there was like this constant thing of like the dead need to be satiated. The dead, like they're gone, but like you need to keep them happy. And if they were not fed, people believe they may roam and harm the living. Ancient burial grounds often have the dead buried underneath huge stones, which is like a prison for the corpse. Corpses were often bound up and found with stones jammed into their mouths after death. So again, there's like this thing that, okay, this person's not moving anymore. They're dead, but like, are they really dead? We've got to make sure, bury them on.
Is that the whole idea behind burial?
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 Burial? I don't know.
Like you're like, we need to put them in the box and put that box really deep in the ground and then tons of soil on top so that in the event that they try to come back, it's kind of hard for them to go back up.
So I do not know the specifics of where burying people below ground began, but I do remember reading a couple things that would talk about people, they used to bury the dead, like used to just like sort of throw them in a ditch or get rid of them. But
at
then
times of war as well, like they kind of have to.
Sure, and people didn't know where disease came from,
right?
And they still didn't know for a long time that bacteria was a thing. But people put together like, oh, dead things are bad.
That's so true.
Like dead things are bad. Like people that go near dead things,
they tend to get
sick and also die. So like, let's put them underneath the ground. So I think it had to do.
No, you're right.
With people just being aware of a connection between dead things and disease, even though we wouldn't have microscopes for, hundreds or thousands of years after people made that connection. Yeah. Okay, so this is kind of what I reiterated. This is kind of what I said before, which I'll reiterate in more detail. So the vampire panics in Eastern Europe. In Eastern Europe, vampire panic reached its height in the 1720s to 30s. Bodies were often dug up, examined, and if they appeared undecayed, they would behead the body, stake through the heart, and burn it, the vampire trifecta. Yeah. You could also become a vampire by eating the meat of a cow that suffered from vampirism. So only vegans were safe, I guess, during that time. Mm-hmm. Romania had actual legal procedures for dealing with vampires, and professionals existed who specialized in getting rid of vampires, aka vampire hunters. Vampires during the Eastern European panic could often make people ill or die without touching them. They had a preference for nighttime, but could also walk around in the sun and would often go after close family or relatives. This I thought was hilarious. Vampires, in many accounts, had OCD. So if you buried a vampire with a bunch of pebbles and objects, that would slow the vampire down because they would have to count them before exiting the burial ground.
Oh my God.
I'm just imagining a vampire coming to life and they see a human and they're like, oh, I'm going to suck your blood. And then they notice all the pebbles and they go, shit.
Put them in order.
1, 2, I'm going to get you. 3, stay right there. 4, 5, fuck, was I at shit. And it's just like the fact that counting pebbles could stop a blood-sucking demon.
I know, that's so funny. Do you know what the origins of garlic and garlic in particular? I'm just really curious why people were like, you know what, garlic is the key to keep them away.
So that actually has to do with a blood disorder, which we'll get into in a second. But just to wrap up the vampire panic during Europe in the 1700s, so the reason for it, why people think the vampire panic exploded during this time, the church, came out and said that vampires were a pagan superstition. So people didn't want to go against the church because the church was and still is in many ways today an authority on, who's going to hell. And, who's going to...
But also back in the day,
you could be outcasted.
But even back in the day, it had as much power, if not more, than, the kings and queens. The church was so, so powerful.
Oh, yeah. If you were outcasted, expelled from your church, no one would associate you. So if you brought up vampires and the church says, oh, that's pagan stuff, people might be like, oh, my God, you're a devil, you're a fucking witch, whatever. And which did happen. So that was the first reason. And then 2, which also has to do with the church did away with the practice that people have been doing for thousands of years, which is leaving food for the dead. So the church came out and said, stop doing this shit. Once people are dead, they're dead. You don't have to leave food for them because that insinuates that, I don't know exactly why it didn't say, but I'm guessing that because Jesus is the Son of God and Jesus dies and comes back in the Bible and rises to heaven, you're sort of insinuating that Jesus isn't special if people are dying and you're leaving food
and anyone can come back,
even though there'll be a blood-sucking demon, they're still coming back from the dead.
Right. Well, only Jesus can do
exactly. So this likely elevated people's anxiety about the dead and how the dead would retaliate against the living.
Yeah.
So to answer your question, the garlic and other things have to do with a blood disorder called porphyria. Have you ever heard of this in your studies?
Yes. Well, not in my studies, but I've heard of it from other podcasts, I think.
What have you heard about it?
Well, I think this podcast Will Kill You talked about this, and maybe Bingetopia did as well, because I did do a vampire episode. But yeah, I do know that, when you said blood disease, that it's just, one of those older disease that could have been associated as well with some, I think they may have associated with people like Joan of Arc, because I think it does give you hallucinations and things like that as well.
Yeah, it does. Gives you hallucinations. Do you remember anything else from it?
So I'm trying to recall it, but I do know that it was a fairly rampant disease back in the days, and it's been associated with a lot of important historical figures that were kind of like, yeah, so like there was losing their mind. There was something, oh yeah, they were allergic to light and things like that. So they had to stay inside. They could only go outside in the dark, kind of like vampires. And but yeah, I'll let you refresh my memory.
Look at you, memory recall.
Yeah.
Have you been alive for hundreds of years? How do you have a memory that good?
But yeah, go on, refresh my memory.
So the blood disorder porphyria, which has been with us for millennia, became prevalent among the nobility of and royalty of Eastern Europe. So this is also why you had a lot of myths concentrated in Eastern Europe, because it's a genetic thing. And as we all know, incest is rampant in royal families. They're all banging their brothers and sisters and cousins. And so all those, genes and chromosomes are, fucked up and passed down for literally hundreds of years. Porphyria is an inherited blood disorder that causes the body to produce less heme, which is a critical component of hemoglobin, the protein in red blood cells that carries oxygen from the lungs to the body tissues. It seems that this disorder is the origin of the vampire myth. In fact, porphyria is sometimes referred to as vampire disease. The symptoms include extreme sensitivity to sunlight, leading to facial disfigurement, blackened skin, and hair growth. So you could really see how people are like, oh my God, the sun. And then like they wake up one day and their fucking like face is all fucked up. And you're like, that person is a fucking deal. Like if I saw that today, I'd be like, I know some science, but please also stay away from me. Don't fucking get near me.
No, of course.
Fangs. In addition to facial disfigurement, repeated attacks of the disease causes the gums to recede, exposing the teeth, which then look like fangs. Blood drinking. Because the urine of people with dysphoria is dark red, folklore surmised that they were drinking blood. In fact, some physicians had recommended that these patients actually drink blood to compensate for the defect in their red blood cells. I feel like every physician recommendation back in the day, it was
like a chicken, run around a barge 3 times and then suck the balls of said chicken, and it will cure your disease.
But only do it during the 3rd harvest moon in the direct light. Otherwise, none of what I say is scientifically accurate. And you must find a chicken
that has a silver feather.
Yes.
That's the one that will cure you.
Yes. And then take that silver feather, put it in your hair, cluck 3 times, and then bang your cousin. And then all will be...
They were like, let's just invent the craziest thing.
Yeah.
See how far these people
look. Yeah, exactly. I was saying, I think everything back in the day, like it doesn't matter if it was, your foot's turning green, or you have
it was all snake oil,
a blood disease, or your back's broken. The prescription was either drink someone's blood or let your own blood out. Like they would literally cut your wrist and be like, all right, we're gonna drain this disease out of you.
Yeah.
And you would die, and the doctor's like, well, he's dead, but he doesn't have the disease anymore. Technically, you can't be diseased and dead at the same time.
For the longest time, like trepanation was one of the main things they did for like mental health. It's like clearly you've got demons and stuff, so we're gonna poke a hole in your skull so that to let them out.
You've got to give them a portal to get out, or else how are they gonna get out? Exactly.
Although trepanation is still used to this day to relieve pressure that's been accumulated under the skull. So that can actually be useful. So that's one of, like, it's an example of like a practice that sounds kind of crazy, but can actually have some benefits.
Yeah. So the aversion to garlic, which you brought up.
Oh, yeah.
The sulfur content of garlic could lead to an attack of porphyria, leading to very acute pain, thus having an aversion to garlic. Your reflections not being seen in mirrors. In mythology, a vampire is not able to look in a mirror or cannot see its reflection. The facial disfigurement caused by porphyria becomes worse with time. Poor oxygenation leads to destruction of facial tissues and collapse of the facial structure. Patients understandably avoided mirrors. And then fear of the crucifix. During the Spanish Inquisition, 600, quote, vampires were reportedly burned at the stake. Some of these accused vampires were innocent sufferers of porphyria. Porphyria patients had good reason to fear the Christian faith and Christian symbols because of the Inquisition. So that is a little bit about porphyria.
Wasn't there something as well after death that maybe I'm mixing it up with other things that like kind of had other symptoms, but yeah, I mean, yeah, that makes
So there was a in Eastern Europe, there was a story of a guy that we're going to get into, Gerard von Swieten, who was a real life vampire hunter. And a lot of people believe that he was the inspiration behind Van Helsing, Stoker's Van Helsing, who was the vampire hunter in Dracula.
Okay.
So he was investigating an incident with people, people in the Austrian Empire on the outskirts. It was like on the Moravia River, like the Moravian section of the Austrian Empire back in the day, where there was a story that spread throughout the region that 30 bodies have been dug up by local villagers, and they were testing out to see if people were vampires. And they dug people up and they said, okay, these bodies are distended, like they're bloated. They thought they were filled with blood. But also they appeared not decomposed. And so people at the time weren't aware that when you bury someone, you actually decompose about 1/8 of the speed as you do above ground, because decomposition slows down because of you're not exposed to oxygen. So people would dig people up and be like, what the fuck? We buried this guy 6 months ago. Why is there maggots coming out of his eyes and stuff? Like why is he still look the same? Because decomposition slows down. And then the bloating, there was anthrax poisoning. There was actually like an anthrax epidemic back in the day. And if you died from anthrax poisoning, the bacteria would bloat you with gas even when you were dead. So people would get dug up and they would be like, oh my God. And then you actually look at the genitals, like people's genitals would like puff up and they'd be like, that's the sign of a vampire, because vampires were also sexualized, like engorged with blood. And so people use that as a sign to, if they dug you up and you were engorged, they would do what we said before. They would chop your head off, stick through the heart, and then burn you.
And how about those killing techniques? How did they come about? Like, why were they like, okay, like we can kill a vampire by decapitation, thing for the heart, and burning them?
I don't know exactly why that came about, but I assume, like, if I wanted to make sure someone was gone and I had zero knowledge, like just like very basic scientific knowledge, which is pretty much nothing back in the day, I'd be like, all right, we got to do one stab in the middle to get like the center of mass, chop off the head, because that's where the mouth noises come from.
All three are like a bit of overkill. It's like, we need to make it really, really, really sure.
And then whatever's left, we'll just fucking put the oven on 800 degrees and shove them in there. So I have no idea. There could have been a specific story. I'm sure there's some legend about people getting rid of souls or vampires with it, but it just sounds like...
Yeah, and you've got the myths of like the headless man on a horse or something like that.
Nothing gets through the cracks. That way, if it's like, okay...
If one doesn't kill it, one or the other two will.
Exactly.
Fair.
So that's the story about like...
Also, they were burning a lot of people at the stake back then, and so they might have had a few that like didn't fully die by the time the fire died out. So they were like...
Yeah. Yeah, they touch the guy and he's like... oh my God. They just cut
his head off.
Yeah, burn that guy. Ew, disgusting.
He burned all night, he's still alive.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
So let's take a break real quick, and then we'll get into some real vampire stories.
Ooh.
Are you ready?
Hit me, Grossfeld.
For some... That's not the first time you said that. Are you ready for some real life vampire stories?
I'm ready to be skeptical.
All right. Let me just double check that we're still recording. Recording. All right. Are you ready for some real vampire stories?
Yeah.
All right. So this first one is the tale of vampire Mercy Brown.
Ooh.
And this is one of the most famous vampire stories outside of Dracula, which was fictional, but Mercy Brown was a real person.
Okay.
This tale is called When Rhode Island Was the Vampire Capital of America from New England Magazine.
Oh, then you know it's real.
It was in a magazine. It's fucking real. It's fucking real. The villagers of Exeter, Rhode Island knew that farmer George Brown had a problem. First, in 1883, his wife, Mary Brown, succumbed to a mysterious illness. 6 months later, his 20-year-old daughter, Mary Olive Brown, also fell ill and died. Within the next several years, his 19-year-old daughter, Mercy Brown, was also dead, and George's teenage son, Edwin Brown, a healthy lad who worked as a store clerk, became suddenly frail and sick. The village doctor informed George, the father, that consumption was taking his family. I don't know what that is. I just know it's like a fucking old-ass disease.
Okay.
Consumption. Have you heard of it?
No.
Let me just look it up because I don't actually know what it is. And the consumption.
Also, was he like this? He was like, George, your family is being quote unquote
consumed by your fucking vampire daughters. Consumption is a historical term for tuberculosis, a lung disease. Okay.
Was he like the how do you call it? Like the word that you're supposed to use not to offend anyone?
I don't think they had woke culture back then. I don't think they gave a shit about getting canceled in 1742.
You know what it's giving? It's giving when they did this syphilis study and they were like, do you have bad blood?
Yeah.
And then like never told them it was syphilis. That's what it's giving.
The Tuskegee syphilis experiment.
You have consumption.
Yeah. That also
we have a remedy for it, but we can tell you.
We can do an entire episode on that. But bonus plug, you can go to auxoro.supercast.com where we did do a bonus episode on the Tuskegee syphilis experiment, which is where the United States government effectively didn't tell people they had syphilis and kept them sick for decades in order to experiment on them.
Even when they did have a cure for syphilis.
Exactly. So just
because they just were wondering, but what happens if they don't get the cure?
Fun stuff. So the village doctor informed George.
Spoiler alert, the village doctor was actually a vampire, so he was just telling like to everyone like, you have contraceptions, keep breaking me, your daughters.
The village doctor informed George, I need your neck. Please crane your neck towards my teeth. Bring me all you have. All the blood you have, put it in a bucket. Put it in a bucket before me, add some sugar. That's the way I like it. The village doctor informed George that the consumption was taking his family, but the country folk of Exeter, Rhode Island, had another explanation. On a chilly...
There's always one, isn't there?
Yeah.
There's always that mad guy that's like, it's the vampires.
I don't know if it's the consumption, George. I think it might be those bloodsuckers if you're asking me. Let's dig her up and fucking find out, you know what I'm saying? On a chilly March afternoon in 1892, a group of men entered Exeter's Chess Hill Cemetery. They then began to exhume the bodies of George Brown's wife and 2 daughters that had died. They concluded that one of the deceased was leaving the grave at night to suck the life out of its relatives.
Why? Okay. How did we go from everyone's dead to we gotta dig up them bodies?
Because the son is still alive. He has tuberculosis.
Okay.
But he's sick. He's not dead.
So he's like, dig up my siblings, see what's up.
So the theory is that one of the siblings is a vampire. And
don't know what the theory is, but is that what it led to? Or like, oh, they're all dying because one of your children is coming back to life to suck off the blood of the rest of your family.
According to this one group of men.
Okay.
Yes. So they concluded, after going to the cemetery and digging up the bodies, that one of the deceased was leaving the grave at night to suck the life out of its relatives. Only by killing the vampire could young Edwin be saved, who's a son.
And what evidence did
sick.
they have that one was getting out?
None. It's 1892.
So they dig up the graves, they found nothing, and then they were like, it's got to be one of them.
Yeah, that was 1800 science.
We got no proof. It's got to be the girl.
What did you expect? Yeah, it's got to be that dead slut. I saw
her. She all bloated.
I saw her expose her ankles one night before she died. She must be a witch demon.
Exactly.
Only by killing the vampire could young Edwin be saved. Who's the son that is still alive but sick. First, the men examined the bodies of Mrs. Brown and the daughter Mary. Finding them to be properly decomposed, some guy's like, no, that's dead for sure right there. That's good stuff.
Well, that's been dead. That's been dead for the right amount of time.
Yeah, just like, no, wait, let me taste that forehead sweat. No, that's dead sweat right there.
No, see right there, she only got 3 maggots. She's supposed to have 55.
Yeah, vampire. Finding them to be properly decomposed, they began to exhume Mercy Brown. Slowly, they shoveled into Mercy's grave. When they reached the corpse, they suddenly stepped back in terror. Mercy, who had been buried for more than 2 months, appeared oddly well preserved. It seemed that her hair and nails had grown, and when the men cautiously prodded the corpse with their shovel, they found that it was filled with fresh blood. The suspected vampire's heart was removed.
Same thing, they were like, how do you know it's fresh blood? It's like, that tastes fresh to me. That tastes like yesterday's blood.
Yeah, they see the body that looks full of blood and the skin's not decomposed. And one guy goes, yeah, we should probably take out, and some guy's already down in the grave. I'm already ahead of you, Brian. I'm getting the heart. Anyone got a spoon? It's kind of funny. The suspected vampire's heart was removed and burned on a nearby rock. The ashes were added to young Edwin's medicine.
Oh my God.
Still.
Can you imagine? It's like your whole family is there. It's like, now drink your sister's ashes.
Yeah. Edwin's like, this coffee tastes a little bit different. Well, it's your dead sister's burned heart, but we did also add a new type of sugar. It could be either one. I don't want to say which. But yeah, just drink your dead sister's heart. Still, the boy died less than 2 months later. To the less superstitious, there was perhaps nothing so unusual about the well-preserved condition of Mercy's body. She had been in the ground during the 2 coldest months of the year. The mysterious wave of illness that swept George Brown's family was probably tuberculosis, but that did not keep Rhode Island from becoming known as the vampire capital of America. South County, whose isolated villages resembled the lonely hamlets of Transylvania, was a hotbed of vampire rumors between 1870 and 1900. When Bram Stoker, who wrote Dracula in 1897, died, newspaper accounts of vampire Mercy Brown were found in his files. The legend persists to this day. In Rhode Island Historical Cemetery No. 2 stands the gravestone of alleged vampire Nellie L. Vaughn of West Greenwich, who died in 1889 at the age of 19. The grave is supposedly cursed. One local university professor who studied vampirism claimed that no vegetation or lichen would grow on Nellie's grave, despite numerous attempts to plant it there. How do you get a degree in vampirism? That's pretty cool. To teach vampirism at a local university?
But to be fair, I feel like that's more like the myth and legends. You know, like it's like a story and a specialization in history. But I'd love to take a course in that. But I think I'd heard about this. By the way, circling back very quickly to this, I have 2 questions. First question is, did they test out how long George was taking, well, not George, whatever, the son, to take to decompose? Or they were just like, we got the vampire, we're good.
I don't think so. I think they saw her body was not decomposed, Mercy. Mm-hmm. And in reality, like we just said, she was buried during the 2 coldest months of the year.
But obviously they were not reasonable.
I don't think they were worried about George. I think they were pretty set on Mercy once they dug her up.
Okay, my main question is, how did they think she pulled it off? Like, she was like under the ground, like I'm assuming there's a bunch of soil. She'd just be like climbing out and then perfectly resealing it on top after she's done with her killing.
That is actually a central theme in a lot of vampire myths, is how they exit the graves, basically climbing through 6 feet of soil and then re-entering without signs of re-entry. Some myths say that vampires turn into mist, so they essentially just like mist through the ground, and then they're atomically
Yeah.
restructure.
Damn, they know how to teleport and we're killing them?
I guess so. Yeah, we're burning their hearts, cutting off their heads, and then burning the entire body.
Stupid
Even though they
people.
solved teleportation,
stupid.
apparently. The legend persists to this day. The grave of Nellie L. Vaughan is supposedly cursed, who died in 1889. University professor says no vegetation grows on it, despite numerous attempts to plant it there. And people are still taken aback by the inscription along the bottom of Nellie's tombstone. The curious words read, "I am waiting and watching for you."
Well, somebody in this town had a sense of humor.
Yeah. Or she's just like a very like emo goth girl of the 1800s.
Yeah.
Like, I'm waiting. I'm going to come back and haunt the shit out of you.
Mm-hmm.
Because nothing's fair. Nothing in this world is fair. All right. So that is the story of Mercy Brown. I mentioned this guy before, but Gerard von Swieten, who is a real-life vampire hunter, and some think he could have been the inspiration behind Van Helsing, who is the vampire hunter in Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the story of Gerard van Swieten. In the mid-18th century, rumors of vampires were spreading like wildfire across Eastern Europe, creating a wave of terror that reached even the halls of royalty.
So people were getting sick with porphyria.
Porphyria, but also people were digging up bodies and saying that they don't look like they're decomposed, so they're vampires.
Right.
They were blaming.
It was one of those panics, like the satanic panic and stuff. That was the vampire panic.
So this is actually a lot of people think it's connected to vampires because witches were the panic before vampires in the 15 and 1600s. The witches were also put to rest by the church, essentially saying like witches are not real. People were kind of over that, I guess. And so the next scapegoat.
Funny, the church would be like, we've done enough damage. It was just your fault, actually. Like they're not real. Never mind the hundreds we've burned ourselves. They're not real.
Yeah, you guys can forget about that. Leave us your children, but forget about the witches. So vampires, a lot of people think the vampires replaced witches as the scapegoat for weird things to go on. So
for the church was like, stop blaming us. Blame the
no,
vampires.
not for the church, for people in the village. So like if something weird happened in the village, people would go, oh, there must be a witch. Let's find out who it is. And then they would go on a hunt to the village, and like the palest teenager would be crucified. They'd be like, "Oh, you kind of look like a witch. You have powers, whatever." Or you're like, you have mental.
You're reading a book as a girl.
Yeah,
you must be a witch.
Or you're mentally ill, screaming, hysteria. You're sick. You're having hallucinations. Witch, burn, dead. Then vampires became the scapegoat, which is like, okay, some guy goes out in the middle of the night, gets mauled by a wolf. Witches aren't a thing anymore. Like, let's blame the vampires.
Right.
They eventually replaced witches as the scapegoat for weird and deadly things. Empress Maria Theresa of Austria, a ruler known for her intellect and skepticism, had grown increasingly concerned with the hysteria gripping her lands about vampires. The source of the panic was particularly concentrated in a small Moravian village, where villagers claimed that the dead were rising from their graves to drink the blood of the living. Her empire's stability was threatened by the superstition, and she needed someone to bring reason to the chaos. For this dangerous and delicate task, Maria Theresa turned to her most trusted advisor and physician, Gerard van Swieten. A brilliant scientist of his day and educated by Enlightenment ideals, Van Swieten was a man of reason in an age dominated by fear. Tasked with the mission of investigating the claims of vampirism, he was skeptical but cautious, knowing that fear could cloud his judgment, yet the root of such stories often lay in real disturbing events. Van Swieten set off from Vienna, a lone figure traveling through the mist-shrouded forests and craggy mountains of Moravia. The deeper he ventured into the rural heartlands, the more stories he heard of the undead rising from their graves and stalking the night in search of victims. Villagers whispered of strange deaths, famous families cursed by malevolent spirits, and bodies dug up to reveal unnaturally preserved corpses. By the time Van Swieten arrived in the village that had sparked the Empress's concern, the atmosphere was thick with dread. Houses were shut tight, doors were bolted with crosses, and garlic hung from windows. The locals avoided eye contact, crossing themselves when he passed. The village elder, I'm just imagining him like walking into a village and everyone's just like, oh, Jesus, and just looks away from him. And he's like, what the fuck is going on here? Do I smell like shit? What is happening with these people? Houses were shut tight, doors bolted with crosses, and garlic hung from windows. Locals avoided eye contact. The village elder, a gaunt man with eyes filled with fear and exhaustion, explained that several villagers had recently died under mysterious circumstances, seemingly drained of life. Some had been found pale, their bodies cold to the touch, with 2 puncture marks on their necks. The elder spoke of a particular grave, that of a man named Peter Plagowitz, who had died only a few weeks earlier, but was suspected of returning from the dead. This is madness, Van Swieten muttered to himself as he entered the small church where the villagers had gathered to seek answers. He listened to their stories of sleepless nights, of shadows moving outside their windows, of sick relatives wasting away without explanation. Yet he knew there had to be a rational explanation, a medical cause for these strange deaths and widespread fear. Despite his scientific skepticism, Van Swieten agreed to witness the exhumation of Peter Plagowitz, the man whose grave was the epicenter of terror. Under the cover of darkness, accompanied by the village priest and a handful, I feel like if you wanted to take out the body, you would do it during the day. You wouldn't do it while it was dark out. That's just me. Because if he is a vampire, at least he's like, oh, and then problem solved. Under the cover of darkness, accompanied by the village priest and a handful of terrified men holding torches, they made their way to the graveyard. I'm picturing the group of guys with torches, and like one of them's looking at the other one like, dude, why is your hand shaking? Like, are you fucking scared? And he's like, no, I'm not scared. You're scared, dude. And he's like, no, I'm not scared. You're scared, you fucking pussies. And then some guy's like, you're the one who's scared, Brad. I'm not fucking scared. Fuck, I'm a man. I'm a man in the 1800s. I'm such a man.
I've already lived to be 25. Like, I've gone through life.
Yeah, I have 6 grandchildren. I'm 28.
I've got 2 good years left at best. This is fine.
Yeah, this is my this is the end for me. Who cares? Under the cover of darkness, they go out and made their way to the graveyard. They're holding torches. The night was cold, and the only sounds were the crunch of their boots on the frost-covered earth and distant howl of wolves. With shaking hands, the villagers dug up the grave. The moment the coffin was exposed, a collective shudder ran through the crowd, similar to the Mercy Brown situation. The wooden lid was removed, unlike the Mercy Brown situation, and inside lay the body of Peter Plagowitz. To Van Sweeten's surprise, the corpse appeared remarkably well preserved.
I love all these guys. They're like, oh, we're like scientists. We know the rates of decomposition on the back of our hands.
No, they didn't. That's the point. Up to that point, no one had really studied.
I know this is the joke. It's just like I love how all these guys are like, oh, we know exactly what a body should look like right now.
Yeah,
they've just kind of made up their mind, being like, oh, this does not look right.
Yeah. Oh, that doesn't jive with what I learned in my.
This is not what I was expecting.
Renaissance
Therefore,
undead school.
Burn it.
Yeah. To Van Sweeten's surprise, the corpse appeared remarkably well preserved, although almost as though the man had been laid to rest only hours before.
Don't show these guys mummies. They'll freak out.
Yeah. Especially not the ones from The Mummy Returns. His skin.
This guy's 1,000 years old? Nah.
Yeah. I think he's just 1,000 minutes. He was probably buried last week. His skin was smooth, not shrunken by decay, and his nails and hair seemed to have grown longer. More disturbingly, dry blood stained his lips, as though he had recently fed. A murmur of panic rippled through the crowd, and several men fell to their knees, convinced that they were in the presence of a vampire. But Van Swieten remained calm, even though he could feel the unsettling weight of the moment. He knelt beside the corpse, inspecting the body with a detached clinical eye. The villagers wanted to drive a stake through the body's heart. Within 30 seconds, someone was probably like, I got it. Fuck it, you get the head.
I brought the tools.
Yeah, you get the head, I'll get the heart. We'll fucking throw them in the furnace. The villagers wanted to drive a stake through the body's heart, but Van Swieten forbade it. Instead, he explained that the appearance of the body was due to natural processes. He knew that under certain conditions, especially in cold weather, a corpse could decompose slowly. The seeming growth of nails and hair was nothing more than an optical illusion caused by the shrinking of the skin around them. The blood on the lips, he said, was likely the result of gases trapped in the body during decomposition, forcing fluids upwards. The villagers were unconvinced, their eyes wide with fear, but Van Swieten was resolute. He made a point of touching the body, showing no fear of the vampire. He then ordered the body to be reburied properly without...
Can you imagine if he went like... Ignore everything I said.
and that was the fall of science. That was the day science died. And it was just someone playing it was just some guy playing a prank on his buddies, and that set science. It set the science world back 500 years. Yeah. Everyone would still be dying of tuberculosis today if that guy was like... Gerard Van Sweeten's like, it's science is nothing. The devil's upon us. Stake everybody.
Can you imagine? That would be so funny too, because it's like, no, you stupid idiots. I know what I'm talking about. See, all this is normal.
I'm the science man. So his goal, he ordered the body to be reburied without grotesque mutilation. His goal was not to disprove the vampire myths, but to restore a sense of rationality in the people, to break the cycle of superstition that had led to fear-driven violence. Upon returning to Vienna, Van Swieten reported his findings to Maria Theresa. He explained, that the rumors of vampirism were unfounded, the result of misunderstanding and fear, compounded by a lack of medical knowledge in the rural areas. His investigation led to the Empress issuing a decree that banned the practice of exhuming bodies and staking suspected vampires. I love how they had to pass a law. Guys, stop digging up bodies in the middle of the night and driving the stakes through their dead hearts.
Guys, leave the bodies alone.
Yeah, they're just like putting a sign on the graveyard like you'd see no loitering. It's just like no stakes through dead bodies.
Show some respect.
They banned digging up bodies and staking vampires, a move that helped to quell vampire hysteria spreading through the empire. Van Sweeten's journey to the Moravian village became a cornerstone in the battle between science and superstition, a reminder of how fear of the unknown could drive people to terrifying extremes. His role in dispelling the myth of vampirism was instrumental in curbing the panic that had threatened to destabilize parts of Europe. Like before that, this was one of the stories that spread that people were like, all right, maybe vampires aren't a big deal. But before Van Swieten, this was like I said, from what I was reading, similar level to a COVID panic of like, we have an infestation of vampires, people going to their local graveyards in the middle of the night and just like, out of like safety, just staking their dead relatives.
To be fair, I don't know if I would compare it to the COVID panic, because COVID was a real virus. It was really bad. It killed millions of people. Like, it's not the same thing.
No, but the level of fear that people had, I imagine it was a similar tension.
But like, we were not digging COVID bodies and be like, we better burn them just to be extra safe.
Maybe we should have. Maybe they're gonna come back and fucking be, SARS-V2 vampires.
We're fine now.
We'll see.
They would have come back by now.
If we get COVID vamps, that's on you.
All right. I'll take the blame.
Though the vampire legends never completely died, they were pushed into the realm of folklore, leaving behind a more rational understanding of death and disease. In the end, Gerard Van Swieten did more than just solve a mystery. He helped guide a frightened people out of the darkness of superstition and into the light of reason, standing as a symbol of enlightenment in the age that still clung to the shadows of the past.
So he's not a vampire hunter. He's like the first guy that was not completely blinded by this by the madness.
Sure, but he likely inspired Van Helsing, who was a guy in Bram Stoker's Dracula who hunted vampires in a way like I just meant more of like the Queen of Austria was like, we're having vampires complaints in our fucking empire.
Go check it out.
Yeah. So in that sense, like he was hunting down the source of what people were calling vampirism.
Okay.
So that is the story of Gerard Van Swieten, who contributed to science through debunking vampirism in the 18th century.
All right.
So
Cool.
pretty badass dude.
Mm-hmm.
The last one I have.
I'm glad it worked out for him.
I don't know what happened to him after. I mean, I feel like if he died a weird death, or he it would be funny if he died and then like he came back as a vampire and he's like, I was just fucking with you guys.
Yeah.
Vampires are real. I just wanted people to relax so that when I came back as a vampire, you
Yeah.
would be easier targets.
Exactly. Yeah.
Surprise. So Gerard Van Swieten, hero, enlightener, scientist. The last story I have is the Carter brothers from New Orleans.
Ah.
And as we know, New Orleans has a long and deep history with vampires, both of folklore and people who identify as vampires.
Yeah.
Don't play with that because the Velcro is annoying. Do you need me to fix that?
I just needed to disappear.
Okay. Well, do you have to do it
Yes.
right now in the middle of the podcast?
I do.
Okay. Has it been there the entire time?
Yes.
And you need to disappear 1 hour and 40 minutes in?
It's been bothering me this whole time.
Has it?
That's okay. Just tell me about the brothers.
Okay, but the sound is annoying.
Okay, I'm almost done.
If I was a vampire, I could just stake through
All right, I'm done.
All right. So the Carter brothers from New Orleans, and as I was saying before the Velcro incident, we went to New Orleans a couple years ago, and we learned that New Orleans has a long history of vampire folklore, but also a community of over 200 people who self-identify as vampires.
And drink blood.
In New Orleans, they drink blood of willing donors.
Yes.
Who literally donate their blood to be drunken to people that identify as vampires. And we went to a vampire bar in New Orleans where we think we saw a woman and a pale man who could have been a donor.
That's right.
Remember, we passed a guy who was like,
they were like, this
he
guy
looked
does
like he
not
was
look well.
really woozy and pale, and I was like, I think that dude might be a donor. And he was with a woman who was like really going all out with vampire paraphernalia, like she's dressing like she thought a vampire would look. But so New Orleans is rife with vampire history. This is the story of the Carter brothers. The Carter brothers are a legendary part of New Orleans' rich and eerie history, often linked to the city's association with vampires and supernatural lore. The tale of the Carter brothers, John and Wayne, dates back to the early 1930s. While it remains unclear whether the story is based on actual events or is a fabrication rooted in local legend, it is one of the most chilling accounts associated with the Crescent City. According to the legend, the Carter brothers were seemingly ordinary men who lived in a modest apartment in the French Quarter. They were described as quiet and unassuming, living a fairly typical life for the time. However, behind this facade, something far more sinister was allegedly taking place. The story begins with a young woman, disheveled and panicked, escaping from the Carter brothers' apartment. She fled through the streets of the French Quarter until she reached a police officer and told her horrifying tale. The woman claimed that she had been held captive by the Carter brothers, who had allegedly had over a dozen other victims restrained in their home. But this wasn't just an account of abduction or serial killings. What set this story apart was the claim that the Carter brothers were not human. According to this woman, they were vampires. The woman explained that the brothers would come home each night and feed on the blood of their captives. She had witnessed them slice their victims' wrists, drink their blood, and keep them alive just long enough to sustain themselves. She claimed that, like herself, most of the other captives were weak and on the brink of death from the loss of blood, waiting for their inevitable fate. Alarmed by the woman's report, the police rushed to the Carter brothers' apartment. What they found there only added to the mystery. Inside, they discovered several other captives in a similar state to the young woman, malnourished, pale, and close to death with wounds on their wrists. The Carter brothers were arrested, and authorities began to investigate the claims of vampirism more seriously. But the strangeness didn't end there. After the brothers were apprehended, the story takes a darker, more supernatural turn. The Carter brothers were quickly put on trial and convicted for their heinous crimes, though the official narrative made no mention of vampirism. They were sentenced to death by execution which was carried out swiftly. However, the legend claims that after their execution, the brothers' bodies were not buried in the usual way. They were allegedly interred in a special mausoleum in one of New Orleans' famous cemeteries. Years later, when family members came to place another relative in the mausoleum, the bodies of John and Wayne Carter were said to be missing. The discovery gave rise to rumors that the brothers had somehow risen from the dead, further feeding into the story of their vampiric nature. Locals claimed that the Carter brothers were seen wandering the streets of New Orleans after their deaths. There have been reports over the years of shadowy figures matching their descriptions being spotted in the French Quarter, particularly around the area where they had lived. These sightings help cement their place in the New York City's folklore as undead figures eternally tied to the vampire myths of New Orleans.
Wow.
Dun dun dun.
When were the latest reports of them being around? Do you know?
I don't know. Let me see. Latest reports of Carter Brothers, New Orleans. This one from September 9th, 2024. Or maybe
What was it, the article?
That's just
or
when the post was made.
Yeah, maybe it was when the post was made.
This is a TikTok that says Carter Brothers New Orleans sighting.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know when the last sighting was, but
I mean, it's hard to know either way what they would really look like or not. But that's funny.
Yeah, there's a guy who made a YouTube video. I saw the Carter Brothers in New Orleans. So maybe that was the last sighting. 2 years ago, it says on YouTube. some guy that was hanging out. He's just like filming a vlog with the Carter Brothers, and the Carter Brothers.
Yeah.
He's like, "Yo, do the vampire thing," and they're like, So yeah. Any final thoughts on vampires? Do you have any new insights or new feelings about vampires, having learned the history and some real life stories of vampire, not encounters, but like vampire situations, vampire fears, crusades?
I mean, do I believe that something like the ones we see in shows that's like actually nor dead nor alive and has fangs and drinks the blood of their victim and live forever unless they get into the sun or the flames or something like that. By the way, also like we say that they're, like allergic to the sun, but it's like nobody has tried to just drag them into the light or execute them during the daytime. Seems like they would just like flake out right away. Seems like of all the ways that we have to kill them, like why is not one just put them outside, clear they're dying out?
Because you would have to detain them.
Yeah, it's like how many people have been roped and burned alive? Like literally you just need to rope him and just let it cook in the sun.
If you catch a live vampire, yeah. But most of the vampires from the tales we told were dead. They dug up the bodies.
Right. No, fair enough. But like if, let's say, a real vampire was there and you wanted to kill
Very real possibility. That's true. If I saw a real vampire, I could try to drug it. I could get it sleepy. I could drag its coffin out into the middle of a field and then, have some sort of Bluetooth button where I could stand far away and then pop the top off the lid.
I guess the burning is just quicker in general, just shove them in the oven rather than watch them cook.
But then in some vampire mythologies, like the show we're watching on AMC, Interview with the Vampire, if the vampire is old enough, the sunlight toxicity wears off, apparently.
Yeah. I mean,
so if the vampire,
then it's adjusted for different stories.
The vampire could get out of the coffin,
possibly, yeah,
and see me and be like, "Dude, I'm 700 years old. I stopped being allergic to the sun 500 years ago. I'm gonna kill you now."
This was the first time that I heard of that from vampire stories, but
the allergy to sunlight is a new thing.
To be fair,
there's a lot of ancient vampires.
Yeah, Twilight, they're out during the day, right?
Yeah, they just sparkle during the day in the sunlight.
Okay.
Which is another, very effeminate.
Well, either way, there's different...
I'm sparkly. I'm Edward Cullen. I'm sparkling in the sunlight.
Either way, there are tons of different tales around vampires. People make them at their own sauce, but I think they're pretty cool.
Blood sauce.
And I enjoy watching shows about them.
If you had the opportunity to become a vampire, let's say 5 years down the line, I reveal to you that I am indeed a vampire.
You changed your question. Do I want to be a vampire? You just said you are a vampire.
But no, I'm saying.
So in that case, I wouldn't want to be unless you are.
Unless I am. Okay, let's say.
Is that what you're saying?
Okay, let me change the question. In an alternate universe where we never met.
Okay.
And you're still single.
Okay.
You have the same family and friends and everything. Okay. Except we never met and you're on your own.
We don't know each other.
And we don't know each other. And you come across a vampire. Could be male, could be female, doesn't matter. And this vampire says, look, I like you. You seem like your blood could be, pretty sweet. I'm thinking I'm going to bite into you, but I'm not going to kill you like all the rest. I'm going to turn you if you want.
Okay.
Do you, in that moment, decide to become a vampire? Or if you want, the vampire even says, I actually won't drink your blood at all. I'll just walk away right now and we could just act like none of this ever happened. And I'll just be a story that no one will believe. So I can turn you or I can just walk away and I won't drink your blood at all. Would you take the turn and become a vampire? Immortality.
No,
eternal youth.
As it is now, I don't think so. And I'll tell you why. First of all, I love the sun. I love being out. I love enjoying the daytime. And so having to say goodbye to all of this kind of sucks. Even if, let's say, it's possible that 500 years later I can go back outside.
Yeah, it's just 500 years.
Obviously, your family, your friends and stuff, you would lose all of that because you're just that weird person that doesn't get old and now has like all these weird things. And, I think I've always said that, I think what makes life so great is that it doesn't last forever. And at this stage in my life, I enjoy being alive. If this was to be in 30 years, my answer might be different, or even maybe 20 years. But right now I'm enjoying being a human. And so I don't think I would take the offer. But if it's like either I turn you or I kill you, then turn me.
Yeah, that's different. I think I would take the turn. I think I would become a vampire.
Yeah.
Here's my reasoning.
What if?
Wait. Let me just give my reasoning. So, if you're living a human life, the usual turn of events is that your life gets, health-wise and also emotionally, spiritually, it gets worse as you get older. You deal with a lot of problems as you age, relatives passing away, disease, shit like that. As a human, as a vampire, your first life or like your first stretch of life where your relatives are still alive will definitely suck the hardest as you're watching all of your family. Maybe your family even disowns you and they're like, you're weird, you're still 28 and it's been like 40 years.
Cast you out.
Cast you out. First life would suck. But if you saved up enough money, which you could do in your first and second life, to where you are just living for hundreds, possibly even thousands of years of exploring the world and living in different cities, essentially inventing a new person every time you move somewhere and doing that dozens, even hundreds of times, I think that would be so fun and maybe even worth the shitty outcast life that you have to live at the beginning when you first turn into a vampire.
Maybe in a way that's because I kind of have done that. Like I've moved all over the world and I would stay there for a year, a couple years. I would reinvent myself every time, have a new community, make new friends and stuff. And then I would leave. And like, of course, it's not the full end of it because I can stay in touch with with a lot of the people. But I've also lost a lot of the people. And it is hard to just start from scratch every time in a new city, in a new country. And while it's very exciting, it does run its course after a while. So maybe I've got this different perspective because I've had the privilege of living a decade kind of like this. But at some point, it's nice to be able to just kind of be in one place. And that's the thing. If you look the same, you can never stay in one place for more than 10 years at best.
You could do 20, I bet.
Maybe. I guess that depends.
How good science gets, too, if people are staying younger for longer.
Also, that depends how old you were when you turned. Because if you turn when you're like 16, you're supposed to change a lot at that age. But if you turn when you were 50 or 40, you don't change as much. So I think you could get away with it. But if you were a kid, if you were like 10 when you turned.
A kid would suck. But right now would be perfect. Like 30 years old, I'd be like, fuck you out there.
Possibly. But at the same time, it's like, if you've been there for 20 years, you'd be like, no, you're not 50, man. There's no way. 40 may be pushing it, but
as science gets better, people will stay younger for longer. So it's actually
like I just have a lot of both.
Being a vampire is actually in your favor in the future because people like you will have 60-year-olds walking around looking 30, 35.
I think that may also depend, how many vampires there are, but like it's like, we got married, we committed for each other for like, hopefully
at least a dozen years, yeah.
Well, for hopefully, the next 50 years or something. But like, 50 years is a fine amount. Like it's like in the show that we just said when he's like, well, we're going to be together for 10,000 years. And I'm just like, whoa.
Yeah.
Chill, bro. That's a lot of
that. I mean, that's also a beautiful thing about being married as a vampire couple is that you could just take a century off. You could be like, look, we've been together for 6,000 years. For 100 years, let's just give each other space and then we'll come back.
Yeah, but I don't know if we could do that. I know the time perspective is going to be different, but like, it's like if we were together for 50 years, like let's say, so then we would be 70. And then we're like, well, the next 10 years, let's just fuck around, see what happens. Like, that would be weird. It's just be like, well, potentially the last 10 years of our life,
but
we're going to be apart.
Imagine 4,000 years. Imagine we've been together double since the time of Christ.
No, I mean, I hear you. And like, possibly by that time, we'll be like sick of each other or something. But maybe we won't be, or one person will be and not the other. Like, I don't know how our relationship would evolve if we were together for that long. Yeah. But this is my point is, if there were like more vampires out there, if it was like a bunch of other vampires where you can kind of like make your own life within that community and you don't have to stay attached to your maker or how many vampires like maybe that would be different if you are able to basically have a life with other vampires.
Yeah.
But otherwise it sounds very lonely.
I like this. We should start a vampire philosophy course or join one.
Yeah.
All the problems, the potential problems of becoming a vampire.
Here's my question. If we were to be a vampire donor couple, would you be the donor or would you be the vampire?
I mean, I do enjoy sucking on your toes and other appendages that are part of your body. So I don't think I would hate being... But a donor is also like so I would I
guess, are you a giver or a receiver?
So I wouldn't donors basically like drain their blood. It sounds like almost IV like because
I'm
the vampire
it's like when you donate blood.
The vampires in New Orleans that identify as vampires aren't like biting into the necks of their donors.
No. I think it's just like you're donating blood. By the way, I don't know how they might just learn how to do this because I doubt that they can go to like a donation center and be like, I'll keep this one.
I mean, if you really told me that you wanted to drink blood, I'd be creeped out by it, but I would not want to drink blood myself. I don't think I would enjoy that. Since I'm not a vampire.
I don't mind my own blood. I mean, like, I wouldn't like...
Have you ever drank a cup of it, though?
No, cup, no. But, like, if, like, I bite the inside of my cheek and it bleeds a little bit, I kind of, like, enjoy that.
Yeah, you get, like, the little metallic-y taste in your mouth.
Yeah.
It's not bad, but imagine drinking that.
But, like, yeah, and also, like...
Like a milkshake.
I know,
a blood milkshake.
That sounds gross, like, just imagining a cup of blood. But, like, even
But if you're a vampire, apparently it's the best taste in the world.
Well, also because no food has any taste anymore. It just tastes... Everything tastes like ash, and but like the idea of drinking someone else's blood. So let's say we both had a cut on our finger. Like you do it all, like that happens. You have a cut on your finger, you go like this, it's fine.
Yeah.
But if you had one, it would gross me out a little bit. Like I don't know if I would be too keen to be like licking it off. So I feel like somebody else's blood, no matter who it is like. Ugh.
Yeah, I mean, the only way to tell, I guess, is if we actually become vampires one day.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll meet our makers.
Mm,
Or maker, maybe we'll have the same one.
maybe.
It's only one way to find out.
Mm.
Well, thank you guys for tuning in to this special Halloween episode of The Zach Show. I hope you enjoyed that. Give us a rating on YouTube and Spotify. Comment, send clips to people, tell people about it if you enjoy the show. And then also you can subscribe to auxoro.supercast.com for bonus episodes. There's over 50 hours of bonus content up there. There's new episodes that go up every month, plus mini-sodes and more shit. You can also suggest topics and questions for guests on the show. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and I'll see you next time.